Fractured Secrets, Daughter of Sea and Sky, Book 2, written by AR Colbert, narrated by Jennifer Groberg. Part 3, The Lighthouse. Chapter 25. The oven beeped, a signal for my mouth to begin to water. I could practically taste the fudgy, nutty goodness of Dom's brownies through the air. It was a refreshing distraction from the conversation at hand. Dom and Tate had been grilling me since Gayla quieted down after her vision. They acted like I should maybe have some clue as to what she was talking about, but I couldn't even stop to dwell on it. My mind was still reeling from the afternoon's events. I had powers now, which meant I would be able to survive a trip into Keeper territories. I could find my mom. Dom slid a paper plate in front of me, the brownie looking more like a pile of mud than a neat little square. But I didn't dare criticize her for pulling them out of the oven early or cutting into them too soon. Melty, gooey piles of fudge were exactly how I preferred to eat my brownies. I scooped the pile into my mouth, then opened it wide and breathed in and out quickly while fanning with my hand to cool my scalded tongue. "Hot?" Tate asked with a smirk. I stole his glass of milk and chugged it down with my brownie in 3 swallows. "Better now." Dawn smirked and slid into her seat at the table. "Okay, so back to what we were discussing." "About the deliverer?" Tate asked. "No, about Everly's aura. I think that's where we need to begin. We can worry about finding this so-called deliverer later." A groan echoed from the living room. "Do I smell brownies?" Gayla croaked. Dom winked. "Told you it would work." 3 chairs scooted across the tile in unison as we all went to check on our friend. Gayla still lay on the floor, mouth half open and eyes squinting in the light from overhead. She looked like she was going to be sick. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "I'm feeling like I will never swallow another pill in my life." "That's probably a good thing." Dom extended a hand, and Gayla's arm still shook as she accepted the help back onto her feet. "Do you want a brownie?" "Not yet." Gayla's nose scrunched. "Maybe some water?" They were already seated around our small breakfast table when I set the glass of water down in front of Gayla. "So, you mentioned a deliverer." Tate steepled his fingers, as though he were the CEO of an important meeting in some skyrise downtown. "Who let the hunter in?" "Everly did." Dom shot me a knowing look. "We've got a lot to catch you up on." "Like Everly's new white aura?" Gayla tilted her head in my direction. "See?" Dom said to Tate. "The aura takes priority." "I really think there's something important in the vision, though," he argued. "Guys!" I shouted, through a handful of half-chewed brownie number 2. "Yes, I am a freak with a white aura, but I've always been a misfit. There's nothing new there, and Gayla's vision was strange. But I don't know that it necessarily matters right now." I swallowed my food, hoping Dom wouldn't be able to read the lie I just told. "I think you're all forgetting the most important thing of all. I'm a keeper now. That means we can get out of town and go find where they've got my mom locked up in the territories." All 3 of my friends began shooting that idea down at once, and I couldn't make out what any of them said as they all spoke over one another. The truth was, I suspected all of this was important and interconnected somehow. I hadn't forgotten my first full day in New York, the day my mom went missing. We were in Russell's gallery, looking at a 4-foot-tall picture of me. Not the old, scarred-up me, the new me, the keeper me. And the plaque under the portrait clearly showed the title, Deliverance. It couldn't have been a coincidence. But trying to piece that mystery all together felt overwhelming. We needed to start with the most basic piece. We had to find my mom. It didn't matter what color my aura was or what Gayla thought she saw. Rescuing my mother was all I could think about. "No," I repeated. "I've got to find my mom. She could be in danger." Tate looked like he wanted to say something, but he stood instead, moving to refill his milk glass. Dom must have noticed too. She stared hard in his direction, eyes slightly narrowed. I wondered what she was discovering in that mind of his. Finally, Dom turned back to Gayla and said, "Maybe Tate's right. We should focus on the vision. If there truly is some prophecy that the royalty is trying to erase from history, it might be connected." I clenched my teeth, but Dom continued before I could object. "Your aura is different. What if it relates to the prophecy somehow? Maybe that's why your mother was kidnapped. Maybe she knew. There's just too much revolving around you for this to all be a coincidence." She had a point. My mother obviously knew something was different about me. Otherwise, she wouldn't have needed to hide my powers. I wasn't fractured. I was just not like anyone else. Gayla nodded. "Yeah, I definitely think the vision was for you, Ev." "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "Just a strong hunch. This wasn't like the others. This was more visceral. I felt things. I knew things that I couldn't see. It's hard to explain." "Try," Tate said, sliding back into his seat. "So bossy," Gayla grumbled, but she tried anyway. With her eyes closed, she began rubbing her temples, wrinkling her forehead as she lost herself in the memory of the vision. "So there was this old man with white hair, or part of it was white, anyway." "Olympian, then," Dom said. "No, I don't think he was. He was definitely crazy, though." "How so?" I asked. She paused, and her eyelids twitched with movement from underneath. "He just sits by the window, mumbling to himself and watching the water." "Ocean water or river water or what?" "Definitely the ocean. And I'm certain he's waiting for you." "I thought you said he was waiting for the deliverer." Her eyes flicked open and settled on me. She swallowed and nodded slowly. The others were staring at me as well. "Seriously? You think I'm the deliverer?" She cocked her head to the side. "Yeah, I think maybe you are." Dom's eyes darted back and forth across my face, attempting to gauge my reaction. "What does that even mean? I can't change the world. I barely understand how keepers relate to the mortal world at all. And when it comes to powers, I don't even know what exactly I can do." "That's why we need to get to the bottom of this prophecy." Tate reached across the table and rested his hand on my arm, effectively lighting me up from wrist to shoulder. I pulled away, risking just a quick glance in his direction to see if he felt it too, but he gave no indication one way or the other. "I agree," Dom said. "We should definitely look more into the prophecy if we want to have any idea of what you're supposed to do. That's assuming it's more than folklore, and that I'm the deliverer it speaks of." I shook my head, still unable to believe anything like that could be true. "Right, but I think you've got a point, too. You just got your powers like an hour or two ago, right? Let's allow things to settle and see what you can do. You won't be able to change the world until you at least have a grasp of your own powers. What have you noticed so far?" "Well, my senses are definitely sharper. I can see further and hear better, and I can see your auras now. I can't see mine, though." "I can't see mine either," Gayla shrugged. "Yeah, I don't think anyone can see their own, so nothing strange there," Dom said. "What else?" "I can swim now, and maybe breathe underwater. Or maybe I don't have to breathe underwater anymore. Either way, I'm definitely comfortable staying down there for however long I need to." "Yeah, that's Atlantean, all right. But those are just the basics. All descendants of Atlantis could do that. What about teleporting? Your mom was a messenger, right?" "Right, but I'm not. I tried, and it didn't work." "Can you heal, like Millie?" Dom stood and walked to the kitchen. "I don't know. I haven't tried to—" "Dom! What are you doing?" She'd sliced open her palm with the brownie knife and cupped it to prevent blood from dripping to the floor. I leaped to my feet, but Tate and Gayla looked as relaxed as ever, propped lazily on the table. Gayla swirled the water with her glass, and Tate just watched me expectantly. Dom extended her hand toward me. "See if you can heal me." "How?" "I don't know. Just take my hand and think about the wound closing up." I did, trying my best to keep my own hand steady. Her skin was cold, except for the sticky warmth of her blood leaking between her fingers as she settled her hand between my palms. I took a good look at the wound, then closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, thinking of nothing but the sides of her cut coming back together and stitching her wound closed. When I opened them, everyone was staring at me. I slowly lifted my hand from where it covered Dom's, and with a shaky breath, I peered down to find that nothing had changed. It didn't work. "That's okay." Dom raised her shoulder. "It'll heal in a couple of hours anyway. That's another perk of being a keeper. Healers just make it happen a little faster." "So you're not a messenger, and you're not a healer. Can you run fast like Sean?" Gayla asked. "I don't know. I haven't tried." "There's energy manipulation, too," Tate said. "It's not as common as the others, but it's pretty cool in action. That's an Atlantean thing, too." "I don't even know what that would look like." I plopped back down into my chair with a huff and rested my forehead on my arms atop the table. "Okay," Dom said. "We will definitely get this all figured out, but it doesn't have to be right now. Gayla looks like she's going to pass out at any second, and Everly looks like she could use a nap, too." "She smells like she could use a shower first," Gayla added with a laugh. I shot her a sarcastic look, but then glanced down at my damp, dirty clothes. I probably smelled just like the Long Island Sound and all of its filthy glory. She was right. I needed to get cleaned up. "Let's put a pin in this for now. I think I've got an idea brewing so we can discover what Everly is capable of really soon. But in the meantime, nothing that happened here today can leave this room. Got it?" Dom looked pointedly at Tate. "Got it." Dom nodded, satisfied that he was telling the truth. "And Ev, unfortunately, I think we need to keep you hidden until we know what exactly this white aura is all about. Can you promise me not to sneak out or anything until we figure some things out?" "I promise," I said, and at the time, I meant it. Chapter 26. My heart thumped harder as we stepped through the double-glass doors that led into the gym. The air stung with the scent of chlorine, and my thoughts immediately raced back to Clayton nearly drowning me in the St. A's basement. Logically, I knew that wasn't possible anymore. As an Atlantean, I was an amazing swimmer now, but evidently my adrenaline hadn't gotten the memo. "Can I help you?" A man with deep brown skin and muscles that could have easily graced the cover of any men's fitness magazine looked at us with a grin. Gayla noticed him as well. She sauntered over to the front desk, tucking a thumb under one of her bikini straps that peeked out of the loose neckline of her tank top. "Actually, you can." The man's grin widened, and Dom rolled her eyes as Gayla cranked up the charm. "We're looking for the pool." "I'm sorry, the pool is booked for the next hour and a half, but you're welcome to hang out here until it's available. There's a juice bar around the corner." Dom pushed her way past Gayla and set a box of cupcakes on the counter. Muscle Man's eyes widened at the sight of them. "We're the ones who booked the pool." "You're the birthday party?" he asked. "Yep." Dom did not look amused. "Oh, my apologies. Right this way." He led us down a hall into a large room with walls of glass windows. The real star of the room, however, was an Olympic-sized swimming pool glittering in the middle. "Would it be possible to close those blinds?" Gayla asked sweetly. "Afraid not. Corporate doesn't allow that for parties. It's a liability." "Close the blinds," Tate said. I felt the harmonies of his words in my bones, and it gave me a little shiver. "Yes, of course." The glamoured muscle man responded with a nod and scurried over to the windows, closing the blinds window by window. Dom utilized the time he spent working to set up the cupcakes on a small table off to the side. 3 colorful helium-filled balloons rose from each corner of the table, wishing some imaginary child a happy birthday. It was genius for her to book this pool for us. There wasn't anywhere else that I'd be able to swim and experiment in the water so freely without the burden of watchful eyes. And there were cupcakes in the deal, which was always a bonus. Muscle Man finished up with the blinds and turned back to Dom, sensing that she was the one in charge. I'll direct the rest of your guests this way as they arrive. There are no more guests, just us. The man glanced nervously between me, Tate, Dom, and Gayla, but he knew better than to object. Instead, he nodded and dashed over to the doors, pulling them quickly closed behind him as he exited. You guys didn't have to run him off so quickly, Gayla pouted. We don't need him. Dom placed her hands on her hips. All right, Everly, let's see what you can do. With a deep breath, I shimmied out of the shorts and t-shirt that covered my modest one-piece. It covered so much more than the bikini from the St. A's house had, but I still felt exposed. My cheeks heated, and I couldn't bring myself to make eye contact with Tate. The tightening of my chest was enough for me to know he was still there. But as soon as I broke through the surface of the water, all my insecurities just disappeared. The water in the pool was so much clearer than the water of the Sound, and my muscles came alive with the freedom to speed and swirl and spin through the water. I raced back and forth down the length of the pool, then decided to skirt around the outer perimeter. Everything about the water felt natural, like this was where I was meant to be. After some time, another body splashed down into the water across the pool. I was by Dom's side in 3 seconds, emerging from the water with a grin. Holy cow, you weren't kidding. It feels so good, Dom. I can't even begin to describe this feeling. Something drew my attention to Tate, who sat in a chair on the outside of the pool. He watched me closely, amusement glimmering in his golden eyes. Well, you're definitely Atlantean, Gayla said with a laugh. She had stripped down to her swimsuit as well, and sat on the edge of the pool with her long legs dangling in the water, kicking softly back and forth. Okay, Dom said, as she hoisted herself back out of the water on the edge of the pool. Let's see what else you can do. I climbed out as well, no longer embarrassed about my lack of clothing. I felt strong and powerful, and frankly, I didn't care who noticed. Though I still didn't look at Tate for too long. He was distracting enough as it was. Dom called me over to the corner of the room and pulled out a stopwatch. All right, I want to see if you've got finesse. I want you to run around the edge of the room as fast as you can. I'll time you to see how your speed compares to the other Atlanteans with finesse. On your mark. Get set. Go. I jolted into action, my bare feet slapping against the wet concrete as I sprinted around the perimeter of the room, ignoring all the signs that said, "Please walk," in giant red letters. I took the first corner, definitely moving more quickly than I'd ever run before, and I wasn't feeling very winded either. This was incredible. If I had finesse, I would likely end up as a guardian, like Sean, though I supposed I could still be a messenger under the right circumstances. What else could these powerful muscles do? I remembered Sean mentioning once that he could run faster and jump higher. I decided to try that as well, just as I was coming around the third corner of the room. With one final surge of power through my legs, I jumped into the air, jumping as high and far as I could. I landed gracefully on my feet, feeling especially feline, as I came to a stop inches away from the hard chest that stood like a wall in front of me. Time, Dom yelled. I refilled my lungs with air and gave Tate a quick smirk before turning my attention back to Dom. So, how did I do? I swaggered over to where she and Gayla stood, feeling exhilarated and ready to bite into my gold medal. Well, You're definitely faster than you used to be. You'd blow mortals out of the water. I gave Tate a quick wink over my shoulder. But for an Atlantean, you were exceptionally slow. Tate winked back, and I felt my ego go tumbling down. Okay, then, so I can't teleport, I'm not a healer, and I clearly have no finesse. What does that leave? Energy manipulation, Tate said, rubbing his hands together. Definitely the coolest Atlantean power. But also the rarest. Dom didn't sound convinced. Well, tell me what to do. How does one manipulate energy? I knew a guy once who could make the lights turn on and off with his mind. Try that, Tate suggested. Ooh, and I had a friend back in Connecticut whose mom could alter kinetic energy. Any moving object was under her control. It was amazing, except for when we tried to sneak out to go to Dion Miller's house party, and she stopped our car at the bottom of the driveway. Gayla chuckled. Okay, you're right, it sounds awesome, but I still have no idea how to make any of that happen. Do I just blink my eyes or wriggle my nose and poof? Dom frowned. I think you probably would have noticed something like that happening before now. It's kind of beyond your control. We don't learn how to create our powers. We learn to control them. The powers manifest on their own. So you're saying I probably can't do anything like that? Yeah, unfortunately. So what Atlantean powers are left then? Our small group shifted gazes back and forth, each of us waiting for someone else to answer. Finally, it was Gayla who spoke. I think we need to call Sean. No, Tate and I spoke in unison. Wait, I said, why don't you want Sean getting involved? I just think we need to keep everything surrounding you and your powers under wraps until we know more about that aura. He's right, Dom said. But why are you against calling Sean? He's assigned to be my guardian right now. The only way I've kept him out of our apartment for the last couple of days is by telling him I had the flu. Once he knows I've got my powers, he'll need to report back to the council. Plus, I looked down at my feet. I'm afraid he'll try to talk me out of searching for my mom. He's not the only one, Tate said. Cutting you loose in keeper territories is about the worst idea I can think of. Well, standing around here isn't getting us anywhere. I marched over to the table and snatched a chocolate cupcake from the box. Gayla joined me a moment later. It's going to be okay, Ev. I promise we haven't forgotten about your mom. We'll find her. You say that, but so far we haven't done a single thing to get her back. It's like everyone else has just moved on. It's not true. If it's important to you, it's important to me. I will... Her voice trailed off and her hands froze in place, the cupcake wrapper in her fingers only half pulled away from the cake. Gayla? I waved my hand in front of her face. Guys! Dom and Tate jerked their attention to me, pulling themselves out of whatever kind of private discussion they'd been engaged in. Something's going on with Gayla. Her eyes darkened, the whites disappearing as she stared off into a distant nothing. She was having a vision. Dom rushed over to my side, and together we lowered her to the ground. We'd seen enough now to know that Gayla's visions typically ended in tremors. Tate slid a folded-up towel under her head, and we waited. Then we waited some more. About 5 minutes passed, with none of us making a sound, when finally Gayla's features softened, and her eyes returned to their normal warm brown. She sat up, rubbing her head. That was weird. Was it a vision? You didn't say anything. Yeah, sort of. She turned toward me. Your crazy old man is getting impatient. Well, did he tell you where I could find him? Because I'm still pretty clueless about the whole thing. He's in a lighthouse. A lighthouse where? Tate asked. Gayla raised a shoulder. In the cleft of a rock? Not helpful, Dom said. It's more than we knew before, Gayla said. And Everly, this mess is definitely tied in with your mom somehow. I don't know how I know, but I do. I can feel it. I squeezed my friend's hand. Thank you, I mouthed the words, but no noise came out. Now, where did my cupcake go? Gayla stood and eyed me suspiciously before grinning and grabbing the half-open dessert from where we'd laid it on the table. I need to hurry and eat it before my training. You're supposed to meet with Russell today? Dom asked her. Yeah, I was anyway. But if there's some reason I shouldn't, I'm all ears. I hate these meetings. Given your last couple of visions, I'm thinking maybe it would be a good time to catch Everly's imaginary flu, Tate said. You don't want him hearing anything you might mutter in a vision right now. My flu is very contagious, I added. You know, I am feeling a little under the weather. Gayla fake coughed into the crook of her elbow and then shoved half the cupcake into her mouth. I'll send him a text. And I guess I'll go back to Millie's and see if I can learn anything additional about my mom's powers. Maybe there was more to them than most people knew. I don't think that's a good idea, Dom said. Millie likes to play by the books. If she realizes your powers have come in, she'll report you to the council even faster than Sean would. Not if my aura might put me in danger. Millie wouldn't want me to get hurt. Dom frowned. I wouldn't risk it. Well, I don't have any other options, unless you know where some old man is hiding in a lighthouse in the cleft of a rock. Look, I'll be careful to avoid her. I just need to find some old journals or something. There's got to be information about my heritage somewhere in that library of hers. Just be careful. Chapter 27. Tate volunteered to drive me over to Millie's place, but we didn't talk much. I was unable to think of anything other than the way the air seemed to sizzle along that invisible string between us, and he, well, I don't know for sure what he was thinking, but he was definitely lost in thought. He slowed the car to a stop in front of Millie's townhouse and finally turned to me. I might know a way to keep your aura disguised, but I'm going to have to practice it first. It's not a technique I've had to use before. Until then, please try to stay out of sight of any keepers, especially your aunt. I'll do my best. I'm going to stay close by, so send me a text as soon as you're ready to go. We definitely don't want you walking around on the streets. I will. And Everly? My heart fluttered at the sound of my name coming from his lips. I hoped he didn't notice. Be careful. His mouth twitched like he wanted to say more, but nothing else came out. I nodded and tugged on the door handle, quickly rushing from his car to my Aunt Millie's front door. I didn't notice any other keepers out on the street, but there was no telling who might be lurking in the shadows or watching from windows. You'd think that being practically immortal would give me courage, but instead it only made me more paranoid. Once inside, I leaned my head back against the door and took a moment to just breathe. The past couple of days had been a whirlwind, and somehow my guardian had become a guy I was now trying to avoid, and my hunter had become my new guardian. The thought of it almost made me laugh. Tate had once wanted my soul so badly that he enlisted the help of friends from across the country to help bring me near the brink of death. But now I truly believed he only wanted to help me get to the bottom of my mysteries. There was no way Dom would have allowed him to hang around if he still wanted me dead. Not that he could kill me now, anyway. In fact, if the feeling that buzzed between the two of us was mutual at all, I would guess he wanted quite the opposite of getting me dead. Oh, I know that face. Jeeves appeared from around the corner with a grin. His Alabama twang came out even stronger when he was teasing me. Where have you been lately? I shrugged, trying to play it cool. School, work, my new apartment. Nothing too interesting. Other than discovering I'm an immortal with strange and unidentifiable powers, Oh, and also maybe the subject of a prophecy that could irrevocably change the world as we know it. Uh-huh. And does nothing interesting include tall, dark, and handsome out there who still hasn't pulled away from the curb? I peeked through the foyer window, and sure enough, Tate still sat in the car, tapping his thumb on the steering wheel and staring off into space. A flush crept its way up my neck, and Jeeves looked pleased as punch. He laughed. "Come on, Heartbreaker. Let's see if Pierre has anything good to eat in there." He gestured for me to follow him into the kitchen. "Oh, thanks, but I'm not staying here long. I just need to run upstairs and grab something from Millie's library." Jeeves pouted. "Okay, but try to stop by more often. We never get to see you anymore." "I will, I promise, just as soon as things settle down." The sound of claws clicking across the hard floor announced the arrival of my other two giant hairy friends who resided at Millie's place. Tiny Tim and Lemon Drop, her English mastiffs, gave me slobbery greetings of their own. I patted their heads, scratching Tiny Tim for a moment in the spot behind his ear that he loved so much. "And I will see more of you guys, too," I said in a high tone, with my lips pushed out. Then I dashed up the stairs toward Millie's library. The room was quiet, and the sunshine filtering in through the window gave me a sense of calm. I stood in the center of the room, amazed by how well I could make out the titles of the books that lined her shelves without having to step any nearer. There were some real perks to these Atlantean senses. But I didn't expect to find any old personal journals on her bookshelves. No, those would likely be hidden away in a more secure location. But where? Millie's desk was the most likely location. I made for it, but stopped halfway across the room when I heard a fluttering noise from outside the window. My owl! I hadn't seen him since he stopped time for me back at the cargo dock, right before my powers emerged. I needed to thank him for that. And yes, I knew how crazy the thought was, but something told me he'd understand. The window was sealed shut, and there was no way I'd be able to get it open. Coming to the same conclusion, I watched my feathery friend fly down and around to the small courtyard on the back side of Millie's townhouse. He would no doubt wait for me there. The dogs were sitting with their chins on their paws outside of the library door, not satisfied with the small number of snuggles they'd received from me. They joined me on the stairs, stepping in front of me on my way down, trying to block my movement so I would stop and pay them more attention. "Hang on, guys. I'll be right back." But of course they didn't listen. They lacked the intelligence of my owl. I sneaked past the kitchen, where Jeeves was reading something at the counter, and made my way to the French doors leading out to the courtyard. Just as my fingers wrapped around the handle, I heard the front door of the townhouse open as well. I slipped out the doors as quickly and quietly as I could, gluing myself to the outer wall of the building and straining with all my might to hear who just entered the house. But it didn't take much straining to make out the sing-songy cadence of Millie's chipper words. "Hey, Jeeves! We just thought we'd grab some lunch and take the afternoon off. You guys have enough to feed a couple more?" Shoot. I prayed Jeeves wouldn't say anything about me being here. "You bet we do. Everly is here, too." Well, that was just perfect. Thanks a lot, Jeeves. "She's upstairs in the library," he added. "Wonderful. I'll go change clothes and see if she wants to join us." "I'll wait here with Jeeves," a third voice said. I knew that voice, but I couldn't place it right away. "What are you doing?" The voice sounded as clear as the horns blaring on the road in front of the townhouse. I startled and spun back around to face the courtyard. My owl perched calmly on the fence between the patio and the small green area beyond it. No one else was around. "Did you?" No, that was impossible. "Did I ask you a question? Yes. Now don't be rude. Answer me. I know you can hear me now, and it's about time, too." You've got to be kidding me. The owl blinked. Twice. You're not kidding? Nope. And I've been waiting 2,700 years to be heard again. Do you know how hard it is to shout into a void for multiple millennia? I glanced around the courtyard, searching for a camera and half expecting Gayla to jump out and laugh about another successful prank. But it was just me and the owl. I think I'm losing my mind. You and me both, honey. Now, are you going to tell me who you're hiding from? My Aunt Millie. I'm not ready to reveal the situation to her just yet. Am I really talking to an owl right now? It's so frustrating that you don't remember. Remember what? Never mind. More importantly, if you're wanting to hide, I suggest you do something about those monsters. Tiny Tim and Lemon Drop let out loud whines on the other side of the glass doors. The bird was right. They were going to draw attention. I released a sigh and pulled open the doors, hoping they might quiet down out here with us. Nope, that was a bad idea. Ew! Call these smelly beasts down! The owl flapped a few feet into the air as the pair of canines rushed over and lifted their front paws onto the fence. Tiny started barking when the owl moved, which worked Lemon Drop up into a tizzy as well. Shh, it's okay. Come here, sweet pups. Sweet? Those mangy creatures are about as sweet as... The door opened again behind me, cutting the owl's words, or thoughts, maybe, short. There you are. I turned to face the familiar voice I'd heard earlier and found Devon grinning at me. A quick look over my shoulder revealed that my owl had flown away upon Devon's arrival. Millie went upstairs to look for you. We're about to eat lunch if you want to join us. He paused, and his eyes narrowed a fraction of an inch. Hey, something seems different about you. He tilted his head to examine me further. Nope, everything is fine. Can't stay for lunch, though. Gotta run. I tried to squeeze past him and back into the house, but he stepped in front of me before I could make it very far. Wait, your aura. Did you get your powers? No, that's not right. It's... I slapped my hand over his mouth before he could finish. Shh. I yanked him out of the clear glass doorway and pushed him up against the wall. Devon, I need you to promise me you will keep your mouth shut if I drop my hand. Do you understand? He nodded, eyes wide. Good. I slowly dropped my hand, but he began to speak as soon as his lips were free. I quickly covered him up again. Get off, he mumbled against the inside of my hand. You promised you wouldn't speak. Okay, he mumbled again. But when I dropped my hand a second time, he let out a quiet, sheesh. Listen, this is really important. I know you're in love with my aunt or whatever, but I need you to keep this aura thing a secret for now. From her and everyone else, too, including Sean. Why? It's a lot to explain, but... Wait, you can teleport, right? Yeah, so? So how far are you able to go? As far as I want, as long as I'm familiar with the location. Would a picture and a map be enough? Maybe. Excellent. I nodded, a grin slowly working its way across my face. All right, as your future niece, I have an enormous request. I will tell you all about the aura, but first, I need you to help me find a lighthouse. Chapter 28. Are you sure we can trust him? Dom crossed her arms over her chest and leaned back against the kitchen counter. Tate had been scowling since he picked me up from Millie's house. Gayla was the only person who wasn't furious with me for getting caught by Devon. No, I'm not sure. I barely know the guy. But my aunt sure seems to think highly of him, and despite being her soulmate, he didn't reveal my secret to her, at least not before I left the house. I hope you're right. Millie is best friends with Claudia, and if Claudia finds out about some new white aura, you're screwed. She won't hesitate to report it to the council. Her husband has been on thin ice with them lately, and she'll do anything to get him back into their good graces. Sean's dad is on thin ice? Why? I hadn't seen Claudia in a few weeks, not since Sean and I first met Gayla and Dom in the Hamptons. But the little I knew of her seemed right in line with what Dom described. She didn't seem too happy to have Sean involved with a potentially fractured soul, even before I started getting myself into trouble. If it weren't for Millie, Claudia would have reported me long ago. I'm not sure. I just heard they were keeping a closer eye on him, Dom said. You heard as in someone told you that, or did you read it in someone's mind? The means by which I acquire my information are unimportant. Dom waved her hand in the air as if shooing the question away. Dom gets all the juicy gossip straight from the source, Gayla said, tapping her temple with one finger. A knock sounded from the door. I bet that's him. I jumped up from my seat to let Devon in. He'd agreed to meet us here after lunch, and I told him we'd fill him in on the details if he would help us out. Another impatient knock pounded on the door just before I pulled it open, and the moment I turned the knob, Sean came barreling through. Looks like your flu is gone, Everly. It was difficult not to wither under his stern glare. Devon slinked in behind him, casting me an apologetic look. Apology not accepted. You had one job, I growled at Devon. Come to my apartment without telling anyone. Why was that so difficult? A better question, Sean pointed at me, is why you've been lying to me for the past several days. Why didn't you just tell me you got your He paused, only just noticing my aura. Your powers, he finished softly. I'm sorry, Devon said, but I knew Sean would kill me if he found out I was getting involved with you guys behind his back. Plus, if this is as important as you seem to think it is, having a little finesse on our side will be helpful. But you didn't tell Millie? I chewed the inside of my lip, hoping with everything I had that he at least kept our bargain there. No. Devon's mouth pulled into a frown. I wanted to, and I probably will at some point, but I can't bear to see her hurting or stressed over this until we know for sure what's going on. Now, tell me about this aura and why you're searching for a lighthouse. The guys followed me into the living room, and Sean stopped in front of the couch where Tate sat, not even attempting to hide his glare. What is he doing here? Tate was with me when my powers emerged. He saved me from Osborne and rushed me back to the apartment. Plus, he's the only one who seems to know anything about the prophecy. Prophecy? Devon settled cross-legged on the floor in front of our coffee table. Ooh, this is getting good. Dom filled them in on Gayla's vision and how we thought it could be related to the prophecy Tate overheard when he was younger. Then Gayla let them know she thought it might all tie back in with my mother's disappearance somehow as well. I allowed them to answer the questions and fill in all the blanks. I'd gone over all the details enough, and I was already busy with the next step of our puzzle anyway. As soon as Sean and Devon seemed to have a good grasp on the whole situation, I spun my laptop around and pointed at a list I'd made in a spreadsheet. What's that? Sean asked. This is a list of lighthouses near here, I said with a triumphant grin. I've linked to maps and images, so Devon can pop in and out easily. It's not a comprehensive list by any means, but I figured it would be enough to get us started. You want me to just pop in and out of lighthouses all along the coast? Yeah, I shrugged. You can do that, right? Well, I can do a few at a time, but teleporting takes a lot out of a person. I only have so much energy to use. Besides, I don't even know what I'm looking for. How will I know if I found the right one? There will be an old man there, hiding in the cleft of a rock, Gayla said. Right. Devon rubbed at the back of his neck. I heard, but I'm not sure that's enough to go on. It's going to have to be, for now anyway. I gave my best attempt at big, round puppy dog eyes to soften him up. Okay, but can we start tomorrow? Millie is probably already wondering where I am. I don't think... Yes, Dom interrupted, shooting me a sideways glance. Tomorrow will be great. Can everyone meet here after lunch?" Mumbles of agreement echoed out through the living room, and all the guys stood to leave. Tate hung back for another second, though, pulling me off to the side. "I think I figured out the whole disguising your aura trick. I'm going to head down to the library tomorrow morning to see if I can find out anything else about the prophecy. Do you want to come? I can practice hiding you." "Yes," I said, too quickly. "I mean, if you're sure you'll be able to keep me hidden." "Great. I'll do a practice run before we leave, just to be sure. Meet you here at 9? "It's a date." My cheeks warmed. "I mean, not a date, but—" Tate grinned. "See you in the morning." I watched him leave, my stomach rolling with an anxious excitement. By this time tomorrow, there was a good chance we might be visiting with some supposedly crazy old man in a lighthouse, learning about my true destiny as a deliverer or whatever. More importantly, I might finally be able to see my mom again soon. Dom nudged me, shaking me out of my stupor. "I'd keep my distance with him if I were you." "From who, Tate? He's harmless now that he can't kill me and extract my soul." "I certainly wouldn't call him harmless." "Why? Do you know something I don't?" Dom pursed her lips, and I suspected she knew plenty that she wasn't telling me. "I can't be certain, but I think he knows something about your mom." "What?" I grabbed her arm. "Tell me everything you heard." She pulled her arm away, gently. "That's just it. I didn't exactly hear anything. But Tate is good. He knows how to hide his thoughts, or at least beguile to the point where I can't perceive them clearly. But I can't shake the sense that he isn't telling you everything he knows." "And are you telling me everything you know?" I paused, realizing the question came out a lot like an accusation, but it seemed like everyone was better informed than me, and once again, they weren't exactly racing in to lift me out of my ignorance, not even Dom. "I would tell you if I knew more about your mom, I promise. I don't know any more about where she might be than you do." That wasn't exactly what I asked, but it was all the answer I needed. Dom wasn't giving me the whole story. But why? And who was she protecting? Chapter 29. Gayla stumbled out of her room the next morning with a messy top knot balancing high on her head and a sleepy grin. "Do you prefer Taterly or Evate? I'm having a hard time settling on your new couple name. You are ridiculous." I pulled a light jacket off the hook near our door. The mornings were already beginning to cool off here in New York, though it would probably still hit 100 degrees back in Oklahoma. That was one thing I didn't miss about home. "And those are both awful. Lucky for you, we're not in a relationship, so you don't have to come up with anything better." "Uh-huh. Keep telling yourself that, but I don't think Tate's done hunting you at all." She winked and leaned against her bedroom doorframe. "You better get downstairs or you're gonna be ever late." I snorted out a laugh. "All right, that one's pretty good." "I thought so too," she grinned. "You two kids have fun. Don't do anything I would do." "Ha! Trust me, I won't. I'll see you guys after lunch." I pushed open the door and let out a little squeak of surprise to find Tate standing there in the hallway. My face warmed, realizing he'd probably heard us talking about him. "Perfect timing." His crooked grin warmed me even more. He was almost unbearably good-looking. "I just walked up." Gayla's soft giggle trickled out as I shut the door behind me. "All right," I said, turning back to Tate. "So, let's hear this plan you have to disguise my aura." "We will definitely talk about that, but first, coffee." He extended his arm and handed me a hot drink from the honey pot. Our fingers brushed as I accepted the cup, sending a familiar tingle down my arm. I inhaled the aroma of warm vanilla and espresso with just a touch of something that reminded me of home. "What is this?" "It's a cinnamon vanilla latte. I heard it was your favorite." "It is. Thank you." I closed my eyes and breathed it in again, and when I opened them, I caught Tate smiling down at me. Maybe Gayla was right. Could this be the beginning of something? Or was I being manipulated, like Dom suggested? Wiping the grin from my face, I decided to push away any tender feelings that may be brewing between us and get down to business. All right, so how are we going to hide me? Well, we're not going to hide you exactly. We're just going to hide your aura. I've been looking into it, and I should be able to cover you in a glamour that would hide the aura from everyone else. He pushed the elevator button, and we stepped inside, each of us gluing ourselves to opposite walls. Yep, he definitely felt that same strange connection I did. But you'll still have to be careful. You'll have to stay close to me, because the glamour will weaken with too much distance. And if another skilled siren comes along, they may be able to see through it. Got it. I extended my arms to the sides. Well, cover me up. Let's see if it works. Tate mumbled some incoherent whisper of words, and his eyes flared into a warm golden light. I felt nothing, aside from the usual buzz of energy I got from him. But there was no glamour worm in my head, or any strange compulsion pushing me forward. Everything felt normal. I released a breath. Did it work? He inclined his head toward me, and a muscle twitched at the corner of his mouth. Of course it worked. The elevator dinged open, and I hesitantly followed him into the lobby. It was mostly empty, with a couple of mortals standing off to one side, but there was no way for me to verify if my aura was actually hidden from other keepers. I couldn't see it myself. Just to confirm, no one is going to notice anything strange, right? Tate held the front door open for me. Right. Just act normal. That was easier said than done. I found myself scanning the streets like a guilty criminal, just waiting to be caught by the first keeper who passed us by. It didn't take long before we strolled past a group of Columbia students, a mix of Atlanteans and an Olympian. Two of them cast casual glances in our direction, but there was no indication that they noticed anything off. You can relax. Tate gently touched the small of my back, and his whisper sent a thrill down my spine. I shivered a bit, and he pulled his hand away. I've got you covered. I would just have to trust him. Finally, we reached the Butler Library and quietly made our way through the gorgeous stacks of books. The library was one of my favorite places on campus. It held an old-world charm with towering windows and columns and giant ringed chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and there were more books than I could ever dream of reading. We took the stairs, hoping to avoid any other Agarthian sirens who may be studying in the building. Once we were alone in the stairwell, I finally felt comfortable enough to probe a bit into Tate's motives. Why are you so interested in this prophecy anyway? He didn't seem bothered by the question at all, as he spun around the fourth-floor landing and continued upward through the building. Because I never believed it could be real. I've been told it's just folklore my entire life. If it's real, the whole world could change. It seemed like an honest answer. Is that why you're being so nice to me lately, buying me my favorite coffee and whatnot? You think I'm the deliverer? He paused, and I nearly ran into the back of him. Slowly looking over his shoulder, he set his jaw before finally speaking. I was only hunting you before because it was my job. There's no need for me to distance myself now that I can't have your soul. And are you disappointed that you can't have my soul? He quirked a brow and started to say something, but stopped. Then he was moving up the stairs again. I'm interested to see what it means for my position moving forward. I wouldn't say I'm disappointed, just curious. I wasn't sure how not retrieving my soul could possibly affect his position, but the thought was secondary to what I really wanted to know. You were there the day my mom went missing at the gallery. Yeah. He pulled open a door to the 6th floor, and I followed him through, dropping my voice now that we were in the midst of other keepers again. Do you know anything more about where she might be?" "Hello," an Atlantean girl with a pretty, almost turquoise aura unknowingly interrupted me as she glanced up from a desk outside of the rare book and manuscript library. She nodded at Tate, then pinned me with a hard stare. "I'm afraid the reading room is open by appointment only." "She's with me," Tate said. The girl shook her head. "Appointment only," she repeated. Tate dropped his voice to a whisper, though no one else was around. "She's Atlantean. She just hasn't gotten her powers yet." The girl's eyes narrowed, and my heart thudded against my chest under her scrutinous gaze. "I don't—" "It's fine," Tate said, the melodies of his voice dancing together in a song I didn't want to end. The girl nodded and allowed us to enter the reading room. "Did you glamour her?" "I had to. You Atlanteans can be really uptight with the rules sometimes. She's not supposed to allow mortals into the room, and I didn't think she would budge without a little encouragement." "Why aren't mortals allowed in here?" The room wasn't terribly impressive, though it was obvious we were surrounded by some incredibly valuable pieces of history. "Because of this." Tate stepped between two stacks of books and placed his hands on either side of a glass case holding an old oil painting. No one outside of the reading room could see us between the stacks, and we were the only people within the room. He slid his hands down the edges of the case until he found whatever it was he was looking for. With a small creak, the entire wall panel lurched forward like a hidden doorway, and Tate gestured for me to go ahead. Stepping through to the other side was like entering a whole new world. The dusty-smelling reading room behind us couldn't compare to the life that buzzed on the other side of the wall. It was an enormous room hidden in the center of the building, with massively high-arched ceilings and exquisite details carved into the rich woodwork of the moldings. 2-story shelves created short aisles down the sides of the large room, and cozy nooks with armchairs, desks, or tables occupied the spaces between the rows. The whole room felt alive, and there wasn't another mortal in sight. Clusters of Keeper students gathered in many of the nooks, working together on projects and quietly quizzing one another in their studies. None of them looked up at us as we made our way through the room. The only person who seemed to notice us at all was an Olympian girl sitting behind the massive desk in the center of the space. She appeared to be a point of contact for anyone who had questions, and she stumbled over her response to an Agarthian boy as her eyes settled on me and Tate. He quickly shoved me into an empty nook, out of the girl's sight. "Sit here," he said, pointing to an empty table. "Pretend you're studying. Don't speak to anyone or look up from this book until I get back. I'm going to explain ourselves to Lydia. She definitely saw you come in." "Did she see my aura?" "No, that's not the problem. I could get into major trouble if she reports me for bringing a mortal into the Keeper's library. I'll let her know you're Atlantean. You just stay here." I slid into my seat, eyeing the book Tate had randomly pulled off of one of the shelves for me to pretend to study. Arbitration, settling disputes across Keeper races. My eyes crossed before I even got to the end of the title. Surely there had to be something a little more interesting for me to read until Tate got back. Since no one else was around my little hiding nook, I decided to take just a quick moment to scan the shelves for a different book. I wouldn't go far, just the shelves immediately bordering my table. That was my plan anyway, until I heard Osborne on the other side of the stacks. Chapter 30. I froze, unsure if I should stay put or run. "She wasn't in the sound. We searched the bottom for hours, and there's only one other way she could have gotten out. Where'd you put her?" Osborne's harsh tone sent a chill down my spine. "I didn't put her anywhere," Tate said. His voice was closer to a whisper, and I had to lean in to hear him. "Well, I know her soul wasn't taken back to the hall. I let the others know about it, too. I told them you had the chance to take it, and you let her get away." "If I'd had the chance to take it, I would have. I don't want her alive any more than you do." A nearly silent gasp slipped through my lips. I couldn't be sure if Tate was telling him the truth or just trying to get Osborne off of his back, but the words stung. And though I tried not to make a sound, Tate must have heard me, or at least sensed my presence. "I've got to go." The last word was laced with that ethereal sound that only a siren could make. "Are you trying to glamour me, you fool?" Osborne growled. No, he glamored me. I had no choice but to walk away from the stacks. Tate's voice still sang out in the back of my mind. I knew I was under his control, and I couldn't resist. I left their quiet exchange behind and strolled to the end of the aisle, unsure of where to go next. Keepers flitted to and fro across my vision. This part of the library was busy, full of these beautiful god-like creatures immersed in their own individual studies. Lydia, the girl at the desk, looked briefly in my direction. Her mouth was a hard, set line, but she said nothing. I could feel the tingle of Tate's presence dancing across my skin, so I knew he was still near. I also knew better than to be seen by Osborne, which left me in quite a predicament. I couldn't stay close to Tate, but I couldn't drift too far from him either, or everyone else would notice my aura. What did that leave? I figured my safest bet would be to stay hidden back between the shelves of the aisles. As long as I kept note of where Osborne stood, I could avoid him with rows of books between us and still hopefully maintain the glamour over my aura. Pulling the hood of my jacket over my head, I dipped down and around the corner nearest the wall. The first aisle was full of law books, something I should probably study up on at some point now that I was officially a keeper. But the next aisle was far more interesting. It was a history section, the largest I'd ever seen. There were books covering every time period throughout every nation. Titles before me read of Agarthian families of Australia in the 1400s, hundreds of years before it would be established as a country by mortals. My fingers twitched, eager to discover the secrets kept within those pages, but now was not the time for history lessons. I continued down the aisle, moving until I felt the tingle in my blood begin to fade. Tate had commanded me to go away from where he and Osborne spoke, but this was as far as I could go without losing the disguising glamour for my aura. There was no one else around. I leaned in, straining my ears, but I could no longer hear Tate or Osborne. I appeared to be alone, and yet I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't. Almost beyond any perception I had the words to describe, I knew someone was close, and it felt as though they were watching me. No, you're being paranoid. Tate's glamour held strong. As long as he was near, no one would be able to discern that I was different. Physically shaking the feeling off, I browsed the books lining the shelves before me. Most on this shelf bore titles from the colonial period of United States history. One stood out from the others, however. It was called The Fractured Souls of Salem. Without a second thought, I yanked the book from the shelf, quickly flipping it open to discover my suspicion was true. According to this book, the Salem witch trials were held against real fractured souls. Excitement fluttered in my chest. I wasn't fractured, I knew that now. But the thought of these individuals roaming the earth still fascinated me. After all, Tate's entire life revolved around locating them and extracting their souls. I wanted to know more. With the book held tightly to my chest, I spun around to find some dark corner where I could read until Tate reappeared, or broke the glamour keeping me away from him. I couldn't drop my guard completely, but I may as well take the time to learn more about Keeper history while I waited, right? It sounded like a good plan anyway. But as I stepped toward the nook at the back of the aisle, I noticed something move in the shadows. I halted, straining my ears and eyes, extending every improved sense I had to see who or what may have been lurking in the back of my aisle. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the sense of danger that tickled at my nerve endings. It was probably wise to go with that unnamed sense. I moved away from the shadows, back toward the center of the library. I could barely feel Tate at all when I stepped out from between the shelves, and I quickly dashed back into the first aisle I'd hidden in, surrounded by the law books. The tingle was weak, but it was definitely stronger here than it was in the middle. "Everly Gordon?" A soft female voice called out from behind me. I turned to see Lydia standing at the edge of her desk in the center of the room. She held an old textbook and watched me expectantly. "Yes?" I didn't want to meet her in the center. It was too far from Tate, and standing in the middle of an enormous room packed full of keepers was the last place I wanted to reveal my new aura. I glanced nervously over my shoulder, hoping to see him coming around the corner to help me out, but I was still alone. "I have your book ready here." The textbook she held was turned away from me, obscuring its title. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean. I didn't reserve any books." She extended her arms. "I was told this was for you. That's all I know." We stared one another down for a moment. I didn't want to go to her, away from the protection of Tate's glamour, but she was clearly not going to bring the book to me. Swallowing down my fear, I dashed forward, nabbed the book from her outstretched hands, and dashed back into my little nook, barely grunting a thanks as I left her standing alone near her desk. Hopefully the movement was too fast for anyone to notice my aura. Pulling the hood of my jacket securely back up over my head, I settled into my seat at the table where Tate had first left me and examined my new book, pushing the one about Salem to the side. The textbook was old, and I rubbed a thin layer of grime from the cover with the heel of my hand. Its title read, "The Rise and Fall of the Manticorians." I'd never heard of them. Glancing up to ensure that I was still alone, I felt the tingle of Tate grow stronger. He was coming back. That was good. I flipped open the textbook, content to learn more until Tate was back. Scanning quickly through the introduction, I learned that the Manticorians were a group established in the Middle Ages with one goal: to relieve the keepers of their power. What? Why would the librarian girl give me this? I flipped through the pages, allowing them to quickly fall until a natural break opened the book wider about halfway through. A note was tucked into the pages, with my name written on it. The handwriting was small and otherworldly, slanted with odd-shaped but smooth lettering. I unfolded the note and read the brief message inside. "I have the answers you seek. Meet me at St. John the Divine tonight at midnight to learn more. R." I flipped the note over, looking to see if there was something I may have missed, but there was nothing else. My skin was alive now. Tate would be coming around the corner any second, so this little mystery would have to wait until later. Slipping the note back into the crack of the book, I noticed which chapter it had bookmarked. Rasputin, the Fallen Keeper's Attempted Revival. My chest ached with the intense pounding of my heart. Was this from him? "Everly, thank goodness you're still here." I slammed the book closed and tucked it into my bag at the sound of Tate's voice. "We've got to get you out of here, now. We'll have to look into the prophecy another day when Osborne's not sniffing around for you." Chapter 31. Devon visited exactly 6 lighthouses before his body was trembling with weakness. "Are you sure you can't try one more?" I asked, scrolling through the list in my spreadsheet. "I've got a good feeling about this next one." "Everly," Dom scolded. "Give him a break." She turned to Devon. "Thank you again for searching for us. You have no idea how much we appreciate it." "No problem. It's definitely flexing my teleportation muscles." He cracked his knuckles. "I'm sorry I can't do more, but it seems to drain my energy faster when I'm going to a place I've never actually been to in person before." "We understand." She smiled warmly. "When do you think you'll be up for another round?" Tate asked. He was almost as anxious about finding the old man from Gala's vision as I was, though for different reasons. Tate was becoming slightly obsessed about the prophecy. I just wanted to find my mom. I can try again tonight, maybe? Devon looked doubtful. Tomorrow will be fine. Dom stood, bringing the discussion to a quick end. No need to force too much on the first day. But there are 700 lighthouses on this list. I turned my screen back to face the others. And you won't be able to discover what is in any of them if you deplete our messenger of every ounce of energy in his body. Dom put her hands on her hips and then turned back to Devon. Get some rest tonight, and we'll meet back here tomorrow afternoon. Tate's eyes found mine, his expression thoughtful, as though he was checking to see if I was okay with Dom's call. The process was painstakingly slow for me, but I would be all right. There was another secret burning a hole in the bag on my bedroom desk. I would occupy myself with the Rasputin mystery until Devon could try for the lighthouses again. Do you guys want to go to the honey pot with us? Sean asked, trying to smooth over the tension in the air. They've got half-priced baklava until 4 o'clock. No thanks. I was already halfway to my bedroom door. But you guys have fun. I'll see you tomorrow. I shut the door behind me and dashed over to my desk, carefully pulling out the book I'd been given at the library and re-examining the note inside. I hadn't mentioned it to Tate. He had been so wound up after his encounter with Osborne that he was mostly silent on our way back to the apartment. And my pulse didn't slow down until we'd gotten safely back inside. I'd practically sprinted away from the library once I knew the coast was clear. I still couldn't believe Tate's glamour had held, and Osborne never found me. It almost seemed too good to be true. At first I thought maybe Osborne had given Lydia the book for me. It seemed just like him to set up a trap like that and lure me away from my friends. But if he'd known I was in the library, I don't think he would have had the willpower to keep himself from taking me captive right then and there. So it couldn't have been him. But if it wasn't Osborne, that meant it had to have been Rasputin himself, which left me with so many questions my head was spinning. How would he know who I was, and why would he care? I wasn't fractured. I wasn't anyone of importance. It should have been easy to dismiss the whole thing as a prank, but the note said he had the answers I sought, and if there was any chance that he knew something about where my mom was held, I had to give it a shot. I pored over the pages of the old textbook for the next several hours, stopping only to grab a sandwich from the kitchen for dinner. I told the girls I was busy studying, which wasn't exactly a lie. It was close enough to the truth to get past Dom's radar anyway. And in my reading, I learned that the Manticorians were established thousands of years ago in the Middle East. They were comprised of humans, keepers who had betrayed their races, and fractured souls who all shared a single goal, removing the keepers from power. According to the book, back in the days when magical creatures still roamed the Earth's surface, the Manticorians had used dark magic to cobble together a beast whose sole purpose was to kill any keeper who crossed its path. The beast, a manticore, thrived on the magic of the keepers it consumed. It was named a man-eater, though it didn't eat mortals. Only the most powerful Olympians, Atlanteans, and Agarthians it encountered. Each keeper it consumed strengthened it just enough to obliterate its next meal. The beast lived for hundreds of years, but it never even made a dent in the power structure of the keepers. They fought back. At one point, there were armies on both sides. All of the keeper races fought against the Manticorians, and even with a few fallen keepers in their ranks, they were never a strong enough match. Eventually, the beast was killed and the Manticorians dissolved. That's where Rasputin came into play. Rasputin was an Agarthian who left the keepers to live in the mortal world. He never hid his powers from the mortals, instead using them to rise in the ranks of the Russian Empire. And all the while, he used his notoriety to re-establish a secret branch of new Manticorians. After several attempts on his life, Rasputin finally allowed the mortals to believe they'd successfully murdered him, and he disappeared along with any knowledge of the Manticorians. Some believed he really did pass, but others suspected he still roamed the earth to this day through the shadows, building an army of fractured souls and rebels, just waiting for his opportunity to destroy the Keeper empires once and for all. But did this information deter me from meeting with him? Not a chance. With any luck, I'd be able to meet with the man, discover what he knew about my mother, and politely decline any recruitment speeches he tried to give before returning home. It sounded simple enough. I repeated positive thoughts to myself the whole walk down Amsterdam Avenue to the enormous and elaborate Cathedral of St. John the Divine. The church was massive, taking up an entire city block, and I had no idea where exactly I was supposed to meet this mysterious R. "This is a bad idea." The voice of the owl broke through my concentration. Of course, only I could hear it. I paused on the sidewalk, searching the fence lines and signposts for my feathery friend. "Where are you?" "Your eyesight is even worse than I remember. I'm in the tree." I squinted toward the branches on the opposite side of the street. Empty. "Other tree," a groan echoed through my brain. "Oh!" I startled at the sight of him, high in a branch just off to my right, on the other side of the cathedral gates. "There you are! How long have you been following me?" 4 weeks, he chuckled. "But this might be your dumbest move yet. Walking around out here at night without any protection is gonna get you killed. You're glowing like a Christmas tree." I looked down at my arm, though I knew I wouldn't be able to see my aura. It was strange that the owl could, though. "You can see my aura?" "Of course I can. I'm not blind." "Do you know what it means?" "Not a clue. But it's different, and that's enough to get you killed." "That's a pessimistic way to look at it." "I am not a pessimist. I'm a realist." "Well, either way, you'll be glad to know I'm getting off the streets as soon as I can find the person I'm meeting." "And who is that?" The note felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. For reasons I couldn't explain, I felt like I needed to keep my theories a secret. Even though this was just an owl, I suspected he may try to stop me if he knew who I thought I was meeting. "I'm not entirely sure. Who are you, anyway, and why are you following me?" Could my owl be the mysterious R? It hadn't crossed my mind that the bird might have a name, but if it could talk, and it had been following me for weeks, the possibility of it bringing me a book didn't sound so delusional anymore. "My name is Alpheus Chenzira, and I've sworn an oath to protect you." "Sworn it to who?" "You." A door creaked open somewhere within the gates. "Sounds like that might be my person. I want to know more about this sworn oath business, but right now I have to go. It was nice to meet you, Al. Can I assume I will see you again soon?" "It's Alpheus, and you'll only see me again if you can manage to stay alive." I turned away from the owl and made my way to the entrance of the cathedral grounds. The bird hopped along the branches of the tree, moving deeper into the grounds with me to get a better look. A hooded figure stood in the shadows of the building, a cloak hanging to the ground. Chill bumps instantly covered me from head to toe. Perhaps I should have given this more thought. "Everly Gordon?" The man's voice was like ice on the back of my neck. My feet froze to the spot where I stood. "Come on inside, darling. I won't bite." I took 3 shaky steps forward before turning over my shoulder for one last look at Al. "I told you this was a bad idea." The man stepped forward as well, crossing the lawn and slowly lowering his hood. Streetlights cast eerie shadows on the sharp features of his face, and his long beard seemed to collect darkness from all across the grounds. The owl cursed loudly in my mind. "Everly, run! That's Rasputin," the man said, extending his arm to shake my hand. "I am so pleased to finally make your acquaintance." Chapter 32. Rasputin's hand was cold as ice, and it chilled me to my core. His eyes cut briefly to the flutter of wings erupting overhead as Al flew away, but they quickly returned to me, hungrily drinking in my appearance. "Your aura is magnificent." His accent was foreign to me. It wasn't quite Russian, but more like it was from another world. He lifted a hand as though he wanted to stroke my cheek, but quickly regained control of his features and gestured for me to follow him inside. "What do you know about it?" I paused in the doorway. "My aura, that is." I would have much rather held the conversation outside than follow him to who knows where in the giant building before me. "I know that it's the sign we've all been waiting for." He paused to examine me once more before turning back toward the dark hallway ahead. "Come, child, follow me, and I will tell you everything I know." I didn't get the greatest of vibes from him, but I didn't get the sense that he wanted to harm me either. In fact, he seemed quite delighted to see me. With one more wary glance over my shoulder, I decided to follow him. The halls of the cathedral were mostly dark. The only illumination was moonlight that trickled in through stained glass windows, creating a blurred mosaic of eerie colors across the hard floor. "What part of the cathedral are we in right now?" "The part that leads to my office." Rasputin pulled open a door and gestured for me to go ahead of him. "You first." I tried to keep my voice steady. He gave a soft smile and a nod, then disappeared through the doorway. It was a stairwell leading down through a musty darkness. A faint yellow glow emanated from the bottom of the stairs. "Do you work here? In the cathedral?" "I work wherever I'm needed," he responded cryptically. I examined his aura as we crept lower into the building. It had a warmer glow than Tate's or Osborne's. It was almost reddish in hue, like a molten lava. I wondered briefly what the variations in color might mean. Were they indicative of the keeper's individual abilities, or maybe their intentions? Surely they wouldn't allow evil to be on display like that. And if that was the case, Osborne's aura wouldn't be an icy golden glow compared to Rasputin's red-hot hue. Finally, we reached what I assumed was a basement, only it didn't open up wide. It was yet another drab hallway, more sinister than those above ground because it lacked windows. As though he heard my thoughts, Rasputin explained where we were while leading me through the nondescript maze of dimly lit walls. "These are escape tunnels. They are rarely used anymore, but they haven't been closed off in case of an emergency that could require the clergy to leave the cathedral unnoticed. My office is just around the corner here." He stopped and pulled a tarnished golden key from the pocket of his cloak. The click of the lock seemed to ignite my common sense, and my stomach twisted with the urge to run. We were so far below ground, so deep in the winding halls of unmonitored tunnels, that I wasn't sure if I could get away before Rasputin used whatever powers he possessed to stop me in my tracks. What was I thinking following him down here? No one would even be able to hear me scream. Al was right. This was a really, really bad idea. Just before my panic could finally drag me under, Rasputin's door swung open wide to reveal the cave-like room on the other side. Calling it an office was generous. The only thing that gave any indication that it was used was a piece of artwork hanging on the stone wall opposite the door. The room was dark, but the yellow light from the hall revealed just enough of an outline to get my heart pounding. "Is that—" "Yes, Deliverer. That is a painting of you." Against my better judgment, I entered the small space to get a better look. It was the painting from the gallery, the one of me on a throne, scarless and fierce. My fingers brushed the area below my lip, where my scar used to protrude from my skin. It was smooth now, gone once my powers were activated, and the title below the painting still bore the words I'd seen upon my arrival in the city: Deliverance. "Where did you get this? Are you working with Russell?" I could barely hear my own whispered words against the thunderous pounding of my heart. Rasputin scoffed. "Never. But I do appreciate his artistic abilities. He captured you perfectly." "What does it mean?" "It means the prophecy is true. Russell must have seen it in a vision, and now, seeing you here with that luminous aura, it's simply divine." "But why would he have it on display?" "It reeked of a luring enchantment. He displayed it to attract you, and it worked. But he failed to kill you." "Russell wants me dead?" "Indeed." He tilted his head, looking almost reptilian in the process. "That's why I created the explosion. I gave you a chance to escape." "No." I took a step back and shook my head. That couldn't be true. "Yes." "I thought Tate created the explosion." Rasputin laughed, a raspy, choking sound, like he was gargling mothballs. "You thought wrong. The prince was only there to destroy you, to capture your beautiful soul. But he couldn't. Your powers didn't emerge as Russell hoped they would, and by the time you turned, the prince had already realized you were more than another fractured soul. He couldn't do it." "You keep saying prince. I don't know a prince." "Ah, but you do. Thaddeus is Agarthian royalty." Rasputin stroked his wiry beard. "Interesting that he hasn't revealed that to you. All the more reason you should leave him behind and stick with me, I suppose." Tate was a prince? How could that be? And why had no one told me? "I'm sorry." I shook my head again and moved back to the door. "I can't work with you." Even if what he said was true, Rasputin's goals didn't align with mine. He'd spent the last century trying to destroy the Keepers like my friends, my Aunt Millie, my mom. I couldn't allow that to happen. "Whether or not you choose to work with me, it will not change your fate. You are the deliverer. You are destined to change this world. I only offer my services to help you do it sooner." "I don't need your help." I turned to leave, but something in his tone when he spoke again stopped me on the spot. "I don't expect you to trust me, but I've never tried to hide who I am. In fact, I offered full information about my history to you on a silver platter. The same cannot be said for those who call themselves your friends." I turned to face him again, and a slow grin pulled his scraggly beard wide. "Just be careful with what you say in front of Thaddeus. He does not care about you. He only cares about power, and he's using you to get it. Once he inherits the throne, he'll do what all the royalty before him has done. He'll squash any rumors of the prophecy flat and use his forces to destroy you. You see, your life means the end of the Keeper's power forever." Pressure stung at the back of my eyes. I wanted to deny it, to call Rasputin a liar, but he almost seemed to echo what Dom had implied the day before. "If Tate wants me dead, why hasn't he done it already? He's had no shortage of opportunities to kill me." "He can't kill you until he gets the throne, or his bargaining chip will be gone." "I don't believe that." I didn't want to believe it anyway. I moved back to the door. "Oh, it's true. The royalty has great interest in ending you. In fact, I'd be willing to bet your mother is hidden away inside one of the royal prisons as we speak." He was toying with me. I knew it, but I couldn't just walk away if he really knew something about my mother. You know where she is? If I knew, I would have found a way to release her myself. We're on the same side. I know you find that hard to believe, but I want you to succeed. And what's in it for you? He grinned again. The expression looked unnatural on his face. It's not about what's in it for me. It's about the betterment of all humanity. I snorted. I doubt that. He shrugged. You saw the other hunter, Osborne, take the lives of my people at the cargo dock? A gasp caught in my throat. I didn't. I escaped before it happened. But I should have known they wouldn't have been as lucky as I was that day. Well, he did, and hundreds of other lives as well. They say they're doing it to save the souls, collecting the fractured pieces in the hopes that they will one day piece them back into whole souls again. But ask Thaddeus how successful the operation has been so far. They've been extracting souls for thousands of years, and do you know how many they've actually pieced back together? The dry lump in my throat grew larger. I couldn't swallow it down, so my voice was gravelly as I answered, 0? 0. Rasputin's smile morphed into a scowl. So how do we stop them? I don't have the details. All I know is that you are the one who will bring about the change we seek. You will deliver us from the overreaching power of greedy keepers who use the world and mortals for their own wicked gain. How? Find Driscoll. Who is Driscoll? He's the only one who can help you. He knows about the prophecy. I believed him. He was a liar and a criminal and a murderer, but on this, I believed he was sincere. Where can I find him? They've banished him. Rasputin's eyes flashed faintly gold for just a moment, but his powers weren't directed at me. He's trapped forevermore on Eileen Moor. On what? The Flannan Isles. I repeated the location silently to myself. Will he know who I am? He's been waiting for you for over a century. Then I guess I should get going. Rasputin nodded. You know where to find me if you need my assistance. His eyes flared once more as he whispered a string of words I couldn't understand. Then I left him in the shadows. Chapter 33. There was no sleeping that night. I tossed and turned, tangling myself in the covers until the sky lightened into a pale gray through my window. Resigned to the fact that I would go without rest, I tucked my laptop under my arm and slid into position on the living room couch. 3 minutes later, I flipped back and forth between my 14 open tabs, learning as much as I could about the Flannan Isles Rasputin had mentioned. There was a lighthouse on one of the islands there, Eileen Moor, and unsurprisingly, the lighthouse was shrouded in mystery after an unexplained disappearance of its keepers over 100 years ago. If I had to guess, that would have been right about the time this Driscoll fellow was banished there. Was Driscoll the old man from Gala's vision? A quick glance at my phone revealed that it was 6:57 a.m. That was close enough to lunchtime for me. I sent out a quick group text telling the guys to get here as soon as possible, then went and banged on Dom's and Gala's bedroom doors. Gala slept through the racket. Dom peeked out just long enough to let me know she was headed to an early morning class. But this is really important. I busted into her room to chat as she finished getting ready for the day. I know where the old man is. I found the right lighthouse. I'm sure of it. He'll still be there at lunchtime when we agreed to meet. No, Dom, you don't understand. She flashed me a sympathetic smile. Even if you're right, and this is the one, waiting a few more hours won't change a thing. The guys said they'd meet us here after lunch today. We'll all be ready to check out your lighthouse then." By the time she left for class, Tate was standing in the hall, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Sorry," he said. "I would have been here a few minutes earlier, but there was some kind of issue with the espresso machine at the Honey Pot, and... Hey, Dom, where are you going?" She glanced at me with a look of warning, then told Tate she was going to class. "But you can meet us here after lunch, like we all agreed." "It's fine. Come on, Tate. Maybe we can get this started a little earlier. We just need Devon." I waved goodbye to Dom and gestured for Tate to come inside, gladly accepting the cinnamon vanilla latte he brought for me. But Devon wasn't coming. Both he and Sean sent messages through in the next few minutes saying they wouldn't be able to make it until the afternoon. That meant Tate and I were all alone, at least until Gayla crawled out of bed. "I went back to the library last night." He pulled a dining chair into the living room, and I was grateful to not be thigh to thigh with him on the couch. Tate had always made my stomach flip, and I didn't need his gorgeous face and the flutter in my chest distracting me, not when he could very well still be an enemy. "Of course, I couldn't find anything about the prophecy, so I searched for information about different auras instead." "Did you find anything about mine?" I sipped the drink and recoiled as it scalded my tongue, still too hot. "No. Unfortunately, we're not any closer to figuring this out than when we started. Unless you found something. Why'd you text us all to come over here so early?" "About that." I bit the inside of my lip, wondering how much I should tell him. Neither Dom nor Rasputin seemed to fully trust Tate. But I wanted to. Even through all of their suspicions, I just didn't get the feeling that he was here to cause me harm. "Actually, I have a question for you." He lifted his brows and took a sip of his own steaming beverage. "Are you a prince?" His eyes bulged as he fought to keep the drink in his mouth. Swallowing it down, he wiped his lips. "Where did you hear that?" "Just answer me." Tate's brows pulled together. "My father is the king, yes, but I can hardly be considered a prince." I'm pretty sure that's the definition of a prince." "It's not that simple." Tate set his drink on the coffee table. "My older brother, Titus, is the crown prince. I have nothing to do with them. That much has been made very clear." He mumbled the last part, his irritation evident. "Why haven't you ever told me?" "It hasn't been relevant." "Okay, I have another question." Tate inhaled deeply. "Hit me with it." "Tell me about your work. You extract fractured souls, and then what?" "We take them to the Hall of Souls in Agartha." "Why?" "Aside from their evil tendencies?" He shot me a suspicious look. "We want to piece them back together. We figure if a soul is split, then the other half or pieces of it must exist somewhere within someone else. The fractured pieces can reunite in the Hall, and whole keepers can be born again in future generations with the repaired souls. It's the only way to save our kind from extinction." "How many fractured souls have you extracted?" "Personally, 6, but there have been thousands over the ages." He looked pleased. "And how many have been successfully pieced back together?" Tate's jaw clenched. "It's difficult to know for sure." "How many are you certain of?" He didn't respond, and that was answer enough for me. They'd killed thousands of people by pulling their souls straight out of their bodies, and there was no proof that they were helping anyone. They were just murdering them. Rasputin was right. I stood and slammed my laptop shut with a bit too much force. "Well, since no one else is coming until lunchtime, maybe you should go too." "But what was it you discovered? Maybe I can help you figure it out while we wait on the others." "Maybe not. We'll talk later." He would have to wait, because I certainly wasn't going to reveal what I'd learned to Tate alone. If Rasputin was right about the fractured souls, he could have been right about Tate using me for power too, as much as I hated to think about it.
Everly, is there something wrong?
Nope. I ignored the way I felt drawn to him when he said my name. The invisible thread pulling us together seemed to tighten, and it took much effort to move away from him. Tate was a manipulator, and I wouldn't allow these false feelings to deceive me. I stepped to the door and motioned for him to go out. Just no use hanging out until the others arrive. Go home, take a nap. I'll see you later. He slowly stepped to the door and paused, a strange expression twisting the corner of his mouth as he examined me once more. He looked as though there was more he wanted to say, but after a few moments, he turned into the hall. I immediately shut the door and turned both locks into place. Then I dumped the steaming contents of my coffee down the drain and retreated into my room. An emotional storm was trying to work itself up inside me, and I was having a hard time shaking it off. I shouldn't be so upset about Tate. He'd never really been on my side, but I couldn't help but feel betrayed anyway. Why, oh why, couldn't he just be good? Chapter 34. My limbs burned with adrenaline by the time Sean and Devon finally arrived that afternoon. I'd been thinking about it all morning, and I decided that I was going to ask Devon to take me with him to the lighthouse. I'd learned through my studies that Atlantean messengers could teleport others with enough energy, and I wasn't going to let Devon use it all up before taking me. I was going to meet Driscoll. I nearly tackled him with excitement when he entered our apartment.
Whoa!
He took a step back. I know where he is.
Who?
Sean asked. We joined Dom, Gayla, and Tate, who were already seated in the living room. The old man from Gayla's vision.
What?
Tate asked.
Why didn't you say something earlier?
Because she didn't know for sure, Dom interjected. She thinks she knows where he is. I do know, without a doubt, and I want to go with you, I said to Devon. Hang on. Where did all this confidence come from? Gayla asked. I turned back to the girls to find Dom watching me closely, her head tilted to one side. She was looking for the answer in my mind, and try as I might, there was no hiding it. In fact, I was surprised she hadn't already asked me about Rasputin. It was all I could think about all morning. After a bit, Dom shook her head, keeping her eyes on me as she spoke. She's not really confident, and Devon, I think you should go alone at first. We don't want to use up all your energy on the first lighthouse, in case it's wrong. It's not wrong. Why was Dom denying this? I knew she could see into my mind. I couldn't understand why she was hiding my meeting with Rasputin from the others. I figured she'd rat me out right away, being the rule follower she was. Unless she was trying to keep me out of trouble. Dom's eyes narrowed. What is going on in there, Ev? Come on, Dom, I know you know. Everyone else remained silent as they took in the tense interaction between us. She stood and reached her hands out toward my cheeks. May I? I nodded. There was no use trying to hide anything from her now anyway. Her cool palms cupped my cheeks, and her brown eyes darkened slightly as she stared deeply into mine. Then she gasped and dropped my hands. Everly, I think you've been cursed. What? She nodded. Tell the others how you know about the lighthouse. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the influx of objections I was probably about to receive. I met... My throat closed in on itself, restricting my airflow and leaving me choking on Rasputin's name. My hand clenched around my neck, willing it to open and provide me the oxygen I needed. Very slowly, after lots of coughing, the sudden chokehold eased up. A whole minute had passed before I was able to breathe properly again. Wiping the wetness from my eyes and shrugging off Dom's concerned arm over my shoulder, I tried again. No. Dom clamped her hand over my mouth. You'll choke and die if you try too hard to reveal your source. You've been cursed to secrecy." A curse? Suddenly, memories of my mother choking until she vomited in the basement of the gallery flooded my mind. She'd been cursed as well. It's why she couldn't reveal my heritage. It's why she couldn't tell me where she was going. If only I could have read her thoughts like Dom could read mine. "You can see it in my mind, though, right?" "No." Her eyes were sad. "It's like a dark blanket has swallowed up anything that might reveal what you saw." "But what about the lighthouse? I can mention it without dying." Or I thought I could anyway. I had to try. The Flannan Isles were on the opposite side of the world. I would never be able to reach them without help from the others. "You can try," she said. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, listening to the thunderous beat of my heart. Here goes nothing. "The old man is in the lighthouse on Eileen Moor." I blurted the words as fast as I could before I would keel over, but they came out in a jumbled mess of syllables. "What?" Devon scrunched his eyebrows. I grinned, happy to still be breathing normally. Apparently, information about the lighthouse wasn't cursed, only Rasputin's name. Eileen Moor. It's an island in Scotland. I opened up my laptop and showed them pictures and the maps I'd saved during my research that morning. "And you're certain this is where he is?" Devon asked. "Yes. Can you take me with you?" Wait. Sean stood with both hands in the air before him. "If you're sure this is where the old man is, then we all need to go. You're going to need some backup." "I can't take everyone at once," Devon said. "I'm not strong enough." "How many can you take at a time?" Tate asked. "I've never gotten more than 2. "All right," Tate said. "I'll go with her on this first run." "No." I spoke a little too loudly, and Tate turned to me like he'd been burned by the word. "If we meet the man, I'll need to know if I can trust him." "I'll glamour him." I shook my head. "I want Dom with me. She'll be able to hear the truth in what he tells us and see what he doesn't tell us." She stepped forward and grabbed my hand. "Of course I'll go with you. And no offense, Tate, but I think Sean and Gayla should be next. We'll need Sean's finesse in case things go sour, and only Gayla will be able to verify if the scene matches her vision." He looked offended, but he didn't object. "Fine, but don't do anything until we're all together again. Just stay put." "Devon, are you ready?" I turned away without agreeing to Tate's request. "I am if you are. The first time is a little jolting, but I promise you'll be fine." "Will it hurt?" "Nah, it's just a little chilly." I picked up a bag I'd prepared for the trip. Inside sat the stone tablet I'd taken from Rossel, the note from Rasputin, a flashlight, 2 water bottles, and a granola bar. I added my phone to a zip-up pocket and secured it over my shoulders. Then Devon, Dom, and I took each other's hands and made a small circle. "On the count of 3. 1, 2... It felt like I was yanked out of New York and dragged across the icy Arctic tundra, but only for a fraction of a second. Then I stood wide-eyed and trembling in a green field surrounded by choppy ocean waters. "You okay?" Devon asked with a chuckle. That was more than a little chilly." I rubbed the goosebumps across my arms. "But yeah, I'm fine. This is incredible." The rocky island we stood upon was high above the sea. It wasn't overly large, but very steep, and it was sparse of any signs of life other than a lighthouse standing tall at the center of a hill and the ancient-looking ruins of an old stone chapel. An abandoned railway and stairs led up to the white lighthouse. All around the island were steep, rocky cliffs and inlets. There were plenty of areas that could qualify as a cleft in the rock. So where would we find Old Man Driscoll? "Wow," Dom murmured. I followed her gaze to the overcast sky, where just a trickle of golden light from the setting sun was breaking through beneath thick grey storm clouds. It was much later in Scotland than it had been back at the apartment. "Well, it looks like your best bet will be up there in the lighthouse. You want to go now, or should I bring the others here first?" "Go ahead and bring Sean and Gayla," I said. "But, Devon, I don't want Tate to come." "What? Why?" Devon looked shocked, but Dom physically relaxed, the hint of a grin pulling at her lips. "I just think we should keep this a small group for now. We shouldn't be quick to forget that he was tasked with killing me just last week. Let's see what the old man has to say, then we can pull him back into the mix if we need to." "If you say so." Devon shrugged. "You guys okay here while I go back?" "We're fine," Dom said. Devon nodded and disappeared into the air before us. Once he was gone, Dom turned back to me with a sad smile. "I think that was the right call." "I hope so." I was less certain. I wanted to trust Tate, but if Dom and Rasputin's suspicions were true, it was definitely best to leave him out of this. The sunlight disappeared entirely while Devon was gone, dipping below the horizon for the night. Giant raindrops began to fall in scattered splashes on our arms and the rocky earth. "I hope they hurry. This reminds me of storms back on the ranch at home. Any minute now the sky is going to open up and dump buckets on us." Dom squinted up into the clouds and a roar of thunder cracked across the sky. "I think you're right." Devon reappeared then, right on cue, with Sean and Gayla's hands clasped in his, and Tate's half-bent form wrapped around his waist, like they'd been mid-tackle when Devon left. What was he thinking? Tate had latched onto Devon like an uninvited hitchhiker, and it was a wonder Devon was able to make it here at all. Weak from the extra exertion of teleporting a third person, Devon fell to his knees and held his head in his hands. "Tate, what did you do?" I scowled at him and knelt to check on Devon. "Are you okay?" Devon groaned with a gentle nod. A flash of lightning illuminated the world around us, almost immediately followed by a thunderous boom, the opening act of an ominous storm rolling across the sky. A few more heavy drops fell from the clouds. Then, as though someone turned on a faucet, the heavens opened the floodgates and drenched us to the bones almost instantly. Sean helped me get Devon back to his feet, but he was still too weak to move. Without another thought, Sean scooped his friend up in his arms and pointed to the lighthouse, now glowing brightly atop the hill. "Let's go." We took off after him, pushing through the heavy rain like curtains of water blocking our way. A gust of wind blew across the open air atop the island, and I nearly lost my footing. The ground was slick, and it was difficult to gain much speed through the mud and rocks that jutted up from the grassy earth. Another bolt of lightning flashed through the sky, striking the island itself not far from where we ran. No, it didn't strike the island. "Tate!" I veered off to my right, to where Tate was laying on the ground. He appeared to be unconscious. The others were by my side a moment later, and the sky lit up once more with a bright flash of electricity. Then everything went dark. Chapter 35. My wrists ached, and it was cold, too cold. Why did the girls turn the air conditioner on? A groan escaped my lips, and I tried to brush away whatever was tickling my nose, but my hand was stuck. "Everly," a voice whispered. I wanted to open my eyes and see who was there, see what my hand was caught on, but my eyelids were too heavy, and it was so cold. I just wanted to curl up and drift back to sleep. "Everly," the voice whispered again. I slowly fought the gravity holding my lids closed. Low, flickering light reached my half-open eyes, and the brightness was too much to handle. Though it wasn't more than a candle in a jar, The light felt as though it seared my brain. I groaned again, then heard a rough cough from across the room. Fighting against the pain from the candlelight, I forced my eyes open wide enough to see the hunched-over outline of a strange man pacing back and forth in front of a window. No light shone through, aside from occasional flashes of lightning in the distance. It all came back to me. The island, the storm. Was that Driscoll? Where was I now? I moved to sit up, but quickly realized my wrists were tied to bedposts above my head. My ankles were tied together as well. "Everly!" The whisper from before was more like a growl now, but the old man pacing in front of the window didn't seem to notice. I arched my back enough to twist and steal a glance over my shoulder. Gayla's platinum-colored locks fell through slats of what appeared to be a prison cell built into the wall behind the bed I was tied to. Her dark eyes were wide with fear. Behind her lay the lifeless bodies of the rest of our crew. Dom, Sean, Devon. They were all there except one. "Where's Tate?" I whispered. Gayla's dark eyes shifted to the other side of the room, where Tate was strapped to a chair and gagged. He was still unconscious, and his head lolled limply to one side. "Is he alive? And the others, is everyone okay?" "I think so. I just woke up before you. But that's him. That's the old man from my vision. I told you he was crazy." I glanced back at the man mumbling incoherently in front of the window. The low light made it difficult to make out his features, but I could see a long, scraggly beard and fiery orange untamed hair hanging down well past his shoulders like a matted mane of a lion. "Wake up Devon so he can zap us out of here," I suggested. "I tried. He's out cold." I turned back toward the old man. It was going to have to be me then. I'd have to be the one to get us out of here. I searched the space immediately around me, looking for anything sharp that I might be able to use to cut through the ropes that bound me, but there was nothing. There was nothing in the room at all, save for 2 chairs, a small table near the window, and the bed. Well, there was the prison cell, too. The floor and walls were solid stone, as though the room was carved right out of a mountainside. And perhaps it was. We certainly weren't in the lighthouse. Perhaps we were in the cleft of the rock from Gayla's vision. That meant the old man was definitely who I was looking for. "Driscoll?" My voice was raspy, my throat raw from yelling in the storm. I cleared it and tried again, louder this time. "Driscoll!" The old man stopped mumbling his gibberish and turned to face me. He froze there for a long time, much longer than was comfortable, and it was too dark for me to make out his expression. A clap of thunder boomed from outside, and it seemed to restart his motor. He immediately set into motion, marching straight toward me. I braced myself, pulling my chin in and turning away slightly as he raised his arms in the air. I couldn't make out what he held, but it looked like it would hurt if he used it as a weapon. Thankfully, that wasn't his intention. With one swift motion, he brought his arms down from over his head and released the object, throwing it down on the stone floor with all his might. It shattered into 100 tiny pieces, and as the object burst into bits, my chest felt as though it was cracked open as well. "The tablet!" Gayla gasped behind me. He must have retrieved it from my bag, which I noticed hanging limply off the edge of his table. Driscoll met my eyes again. His glowed a beautiful shade of blue, almost a turquoise, and they were wild with an energy I couldn't decipher. Did he want to kill me? Because shattering the tablet definitely made me feel like I was one step closer to death. It wasn't just the emotional loss of the piece, but physically I felt broken as well. "Everly, you're glowing," Gayla said. I glanced down at my arms and saw nothing. Driscoll must have seen it, though. A strange grin spread its way slowly across his scruffy face. The candlelight glinted off of his teeth, casting eerie yellow flashes from his mouth. It added to the madness he already projected. Another crack of thunder drew my attention briefly to the window. It was loud enough to cause Tate to stir, and with his movement returned the strange tingle across my skin. Only it was different this time. It wasn't the invisible thread that drew me into Tate that I felt buzzing through my body. It was more like a new sense of life, an energy I'd never felt before. It pulsed along with my heart, increasing in speed and force with every thump in my chest. Driscoll threw his head back and laughed maniacally. Then he looked down at the floor where the pieces of my tablet still lay scattered like leaves in the fall. It was easy to see where the pieces had fallen because they now emitted that same strange glow I'd seen back in the gallery. Driscoll, Gayla, and I all watched in silent wonder as the pieces moved back together, dragging themselves roughly across the floor until they snapped back into place like a magnetic puzzle. It was the same thing they'd done when I dropped it in the gallery. But this time I felt each piece as it reconnected with the whole. As the tablet came back together, so did I. I could feel its power surging through my veins, again and again, until at long last the tablet had been fully restored. With one quick tug, I broke through the ropes binding me to the bed. I jerked my feet apart, snapping the rope that had been wrapped around my ankles as well. I sat up, stronger than I'd ever been, rubbing the tender area where my wrists had gone slightly raw, then stood. Driscoll took one step back as I approached him. There wasn't fear in his eyes. It was something else. Respect? Reverence, maybe? Whatever it was undeserved. I bent down and picked up the tablet, examining the carvings in the stone and confirming it was the same as it had been before it was broken. Then I pulled it to my chest, and a bright white light filled the small stone room. Driscoll fell to his knees, bowing his head clear down to the floor. The wind howled through the rain that pelted the small window on the outside wall, but even through the racket, I heard his shaky voice croak out a single word that would change my life forever. Deliverer. Chapter 36. The bright light faded as quickly as it had come on. Dom, Sean, Devon, and Tate all stirred, awakened by the flash and groaning in pain. Gayla rushed to help the others in the cell, and I shot Tate a wary glance from where he sat tied to his chair. Turning away again, I extended a hand to the old man, who was still bowing with his face to the ground. "Driscoll, stand up. We need to talk." He slowly raised his face, but did not meet my eyes. I wiggled my hand, urging him to take it, then helped him to his feet. "Will you please release my friends?" "The friends, yes. The prince?" He cut a sharp look to where Tate sat. "I think not." Driscoll's words were thick with the German accent, and though he looked like a hermit driven to solitary insanity, he spoke with a high level of intelligence and carried himself like a man who had plenty of experience in the highest echelons of society. Tate caught my eyes, and I held his gaze for a long minute while Driscoll fumbled with some keys to open the prison cell behind me. His expression was pleading, almost desperate. He turned to Driscoll and his irises flashed gold, but nothing happened. A siren needed his voice for glamour, and Driscoll had Tate gagged. He was as helpless in that chair as a mortal. I felt no joy seeing him in that state, but I wasn't ready to set him free either, not yet. With clenched teeth, I turned away in time to see my friends stumble out of the prison cell. Gayla and Dom rushed forward and wrapped me in their arms. Devon, still too weak to move much, slinked out and plopped himself down on the bed I'd been tied to. Sean was a whole different story, however. His guardian training kicked in, and he bowed up, chest out, hands clenched into fists, chin held high, giving Driscoll the most intimidating look he could muster. "You've got some explaining to do, old man." His voice came out like a growl. Driscoll was unfazed. Once his keys were secure back in his pocket, he approached me and placed his hands on my shoulders. I clutched the tablet even tighter, feeling its power become one with my own. I didn't fear Driscoll. It was hard to explain, but there was a new confidence ignited within me. I feared nothing. With a gentle squeeze on my shoulders, Driscoll spoke. "Deliverer, I've been waiting for this day. I knew you would come." "Why do you believe that I am the deliverer?" "Because you are alive. The curse did not strike you dead. The earth wants you to know of the prophecy, and you will know." "And my friends?" "The deliverer's power does not answer to the laws of the keeper's world. You wanted your friends to live, and they did." He cut his eyes back over to Tate. "Even the prince," he mumbled bitterly. "Please, Driscoll, tell me everything you know." "Follow me. My notes are stored in the lighthouse." We turned toward a primitive doorway carved into the stone beyond the prison cell. It was opposite the window wall, and I suspected it led deeper into the center of the island. This was how he'd stayed hidden from mortals for so many years. He lived within the island rather than on top of it. Tate fought against his restraints, grunting through the gag to get my attention. We couldn't just leave him there, but the list of people who didn't trust him was growing longer by the minute. "If I let you free, will you promise not to use your powers on anyone here on the island?" Tate nodded, and I turned to Dom. She stared thoughtfully at him, head slightly inclined as she studied his inner thoughts. Finally, with a small frown, she turned to me. "He's telling the truth. He will not use his powers here, as much as he hates to hold them back." His brows furrowed, annoyed, and probably feeling a little violated at having Dom root around in his mind. I could relate. I stepped toward him, and my skin responded immediately to the proximity. Energy buzzed along my arms, urging me to reach out and touch him. Tate's eyes met mine, his breathing faster. He felt it too. Ignoring the urge, I settled on the ropes binding his legs and easily snapped them apart with some superhuman strength I'd never before possessed. I could get used to this. I broke the bind, tying his torso to the chair next, but I left the gag and his wrists secured behind his back. "I want to trust you," I whispered, so that only he could hear it. "But The explanation caught in my throat. I wasn't sure how to finish. A clap of thunder rattled the windows, taking the pressure off of me. "Come," Driscoll said. "The curse is growing angry." We followed him into a narrow stone passageway, illuminated only by the flickering candle in the lantern he carried. Devon had one arm thrown over Sean's shoulder, and Sean half carried, half dragged his friend's weak body along. Driscoll mumbled more as we followed him through the winding tunnel. It was a constant incline drawing us ever upward, up to the top of the island, where the white lighthouse stood like a beacon in the night. Though I couldn't quite make out his words, they may have been German or Bavarian, there was a strong undertone of courage. He was nervous, for sure, but Driscoll fought through his fear to do what he felt was right. "We won't let anything happen to you." I tried to sound braver than I felt. "What do you mean?" he asked over his shoulder. "You mentioned a curse surrounding the prophecy. I assume it affects you as well, but if it's true that my powers somehow counteract those of the Keepers and their curse, I want you to know that you are safe. I won't let them hurt you." Driscoll laughed the same maniacal chortle from before. "It is my destiny." He pushed a large, flat rock up over his head and shifted it to one side. Light immediately filled the dingy stone tunnel we huddled in, flooding down from the artificially illuminated lighthouse above us. We climbed out one by one. I stood behind Tate, steadying him as he ascended the ladder without any hands. My hands felt hot on his lower back, and that invisible force pushing us together didn't want me to pull away when he reached the room above. But this was no time to fantasize about embracing Tate. We were on the precipice of something great, and everyone knew it. Finally, I emerged from the tunnel and gathered together with the others in a small room lined with shelves. "Would you care for tea?" "No, thank you," Dom said at the same time Gayla exclaimed, "Yes!" "Me too." Driscoll smiled at Gayla, then set off to the small kitchen to fill a kettle and bring the water to a boil. The storm raged on outside as he went about his work, with lightning flashes and booms of thunder filling the room every few minutes. I examined the books and files on the shelves as he worked, but most were written in languages I was unfamiliar with. After a short time, Driscoll returned with hot cups of tea for everyone, but Tate. Maybe it was a slight against him, but Tate wouldn't be able to enjoy it with the gag in his mouth anyway. Still, I couldn't bring myself to make eye contact with him, or else I'd probably crack from the guilt and set him free. "So," Driscoll said, settling into a seat at a small table near the kitchen area, "what do you know about the prophecy?" "Nothing," I admitted. Tate is the only one of us who had ever heard of it before. Would you like him to share what he knows? "No," Driscoll scoffed. "He is Agarthian royalty, yes?" Tate hung his head as we confirmed it. "Then he should not be here at all. The royalty is to blame for this curse on our world. They destroyed the prophecy. They do not want it to come to fruition, but it must. You must deliver us from their evil." The old man trembled, revealing his desperation. Tate lifted his gaze back to mine, his eyes wide and glistening. They weren't filled with guilt or hatred. He looked very much like a victim rather than a villain. I couldn't believe that Tate had anything to do with the evil Driscoll spoke of, royalty or not. "He will kill you now that he knows what you are," Driscoll continued. "That is his destiny." "No," Dom said. "He may not be entirely forthcoming, but he doesn't want Everly dead. I can see that clearly." Tate's eyes glimmered in the light, the golden flecks calling out to me on some deeper level, and I couldn't resist any longer. With a new swiftness, I broke the binding on his wrists and removed his gag, praying that I wouldn't soon come to regret it. "I will never kill you." The words spilled from his mouth in a hurry, as though he expected me to gag him again at any moment. "Never. You have my word. I will do whatever it takes to protect you for as long as I live. This is my oath, through the sky, the sea, and the earth on which we stand." A collective gasp filled the room. "Well, there you have it," Gayla said, calmly sipping her tea. "The hunter has sworn himself to you. If he kills you now, he'll die on the spot." She put a hand on her chest and looked up to the sky. "Is that true?" My voice was shakier than I would have preferred. Tate nodded. "But Dom is right. There's something I haven't mentioned." Driscoll snorted and took a long drink from his own mug. "My mission to hunt you did not come from my own Agarthian superiors, not directly anyway. It was an order from a higher power. You see, there is a group of elite keepers across the races, the highest ranks within the royal courts, and they work together for the betterment of the earth. The order to extract your soul came directly from them, from Russell and the Olympian king specifically." "Why?" "I don't know. They didn't say, but it was important enough that I was promised the crown if I could pull it off." My chest cracked. It was true then, what Rasputin said. Tate only wanted power. He only wanted the Agarthian throne. And after he got it, what would become of me? So what now? Are you still after the crown?
No. Tate shook his head emphatically. Now there is something bigger to work toward. I don't have to save my kingdom by sacrificing myself for the Agarthian throne. I can save it by helping you destroy it.
Chapter 37. Tate's words hung heavily in the air for some time. I couldn't be certain that what he said was true. How could someone, a prince no less, be so enthusiastic about destroying his own kingdom? It didn't make sense. But at least I didn't have to worry about him trying to kill me now that he'd given the oath. Well, I said after a minute, then I suppose we need to learn as much as we can about this prophecy. Driscoll grunted his approval and downed the rest of his tea. He set his cup on the table, steepled his fingers, and inhaled a deep breath. I knew then there was much more to this prophecy than I could have imagined. There have always been rumors, he began, ever since I was a child. Stories of our kind, how we began, our purpose on the earth, and how we would end. Over time, it became more like a fairy tale than actual history. But I could never forget those stories from my youth. They struck a chord in me, and I dedicated my life to discovering more about the secrets of our ancestry. At university, I specialized in lost and forgotten languages. My partner and I traveled across the globe, reviewing ancient artifacts and deciphering their meanings for museums and private collections. But a little over a century ago, we found something truly incredible, a stone tablet. His eyes cut briefly to the object I clutched in my arms, and I found myself squeezing it tighter. He watched me with wonder, his aqua blue eyes twinkling with respect, framed by his wild mane of orange hair. But there was one tuft of curls that didn't blend in with the rest of his fiery head of hair. One white swirl of curls hung low over his brow. Though he was older now, and certainly aged by the stress of his situation, there was no denying who this man was. I'd seen him before, in a slideshow on my first day at Columbia. You worked with Professor Brossard, didn't you? Driscoll nodded sadly. Indeed. The professor had lied to me. How many people were in on this? How many people knew my true identity? The tablet we found was but a fraction of the whole. We knew what it said, but it made no sense, not without the other pieces. I paused all of my other projects, devoting everything I had to this one stone tablet. Why? I asked. Why this one? Because I knew it was special. I did not understand the greater context, but there was one word that revealed enough for me to know that the world would never be the same. I looked down at the object in my arms, and I could practically feel it pulsing along with my heart, faster as the power of the object became more and more tangible. What is it? My voice was a whisper. What does it say? Driscoll held out his hand, and I gently laid my treasure on his palm. He grinned, as though he were seeing the face of a long-lost friend. It says, the daughter of, together with, ignites her, centennial, shall form the powers, the deliverer. He pointed to the different symbols as he read their meanings aloud. My stomach sank. That means nothing to me. Driscoll chuckled. It means nothing to anyone, but it mentions the deliverer, and that was enough for me to give it further exploration. I was so close to cracking the code. Too close. The elites took notice of my efforts. You see, they've known about the prophecy since the dawn of time.
It was carved into stone by the prophets of the 1st century. The royalty did not like what they saw. They did not want to hear of their demise, and they believed that in destroying the prophecy, they could destroy the truth behind it as well. But the prophecy could not be destroyed, as you have noticed. The greatest damage they could achieve was breaking the tablet into 4 pieces. Each kingdom took 1/4 of the stone to hide within their territories, and the 4th was cast deep into the depths of the earth, buried beneath the Arctic, where neither man nor keeper would ever dare to locate it. But by some miracle, it washed upon the shores of Greenland a little over 100 years ago. It was found by a mortal who called upon my partner and I to inspect it. I discovered what it was through ancient writings. Diaries and fictional accounts provided more information, and I made it my personal mission to learn whatever I could about this deliverer. As the world grew more evil each year, I saw the need for you to destroy the status quo and give us the reset we all so desperately need. When the elites realized what I was trying to achieve, they tried again to destroy the object you hold now, but it was not possible. It could not be destroyed, and it could not be cursed. So they cursed me instead, and banished me here to this island, which is also cursed. They created a fictional narrative, convincing keepers across the world that any mention of the tablet or the prophecy would curse them as well. They believe I lost my mind, he chuckled, and perhaps I have, but I know that you are real, and I know that you have the power to change the world. The storm roared outside, and a particularly loud crack of thunder made me jump in my seat. Driscoll looked nervously toward the lighthouse window. I've said too much. The island will kill me now. It is my destiny. It's not, I argued. I won't let anything happen to you. Tell me, Driscoll, what do I do now? How do I change the world? He took my hand in his and gave it a firm squeeze. You must find the other pieces of the tablet. You must travel to each of the 3 kingdoms to restore it and use its power to accomplish the task before you. I can help, Tate said. I can get us into the Agarthian palace. I wanted to trust him, but common sense won out again. Maybe we should start with Atlantis. That's the one place I should be welcomed. Driscoll took another deep breath and looked up to the sky. It is time. He squeezed my hand again. I wish you well. The entire lighthouse reverberated with a jolt of electricity, followed by a crack of thunder so loud it made my bones ache. A moment later, I became aware of smoke and Tate pulling on my hand. The lighthouse is burning. We've got to get out. He pulled me through the doors and out onto the island. Darkness covered the earth like a blanket, a heavy, wet blanket that threatened to snuff out any life that dared to stand up against it. The storm raged harder than ever, wind whipping the raindrops against my cheeks like stones. We'd made it about 20 paces away from the building before we turned to stare in awe. The lighthouse tower burned, blazing brightly even through the torrential downpour. Waves rose from the ocean surrounding us, like angry giants waking from a slumber. They grew taller and taller, an army of great walls moving toward the island. The curse is here for me, Driscoll said. I pray it won't get us all. It won't. I will keep you safe. All of you. I turned to look at my friends one at a time, allowing my eyes to linger on each of theirs long enough for them to understand just how serious I was. I swear it as the deliverer, as my oath, through the sky, the sea, and the earth on which we stand.
I repeated the words Tate had uttered just minutes earlier, and felt a lock snap taut in my chest as some greater power made my words a reality. The largest of the waves was nearing the island, growing larger with every passing second, and I knew my words wouldn't be enough. It wasn't stopping. The curse was going to wipe us all away into the depths of the ocean. I'd survive, and the other Atlanteans, perhaps, but I would not allow it to kill my friends. We'd come too far to be swept away by some water. Anger boiled red-hot inside me, and I lifted my arms as though I might block the water from reaching us. A guttural yell escaped my throat, originating from deep in my belly and sounding like something from another creature in another world. I couldn't explain where it came from if I tried, but it did the trick. The wave split into two, avoiding my outstretched arms and my death-like war cry. It crashed to the earth, extinguishing the flames of the lighthouse and falling back into the ocean. "Enough!" I yelled again. Spinning around with my arms still outstretched above my head, I stared down the storm, scolding it like a naughty child, and to my amazement, it cowered at my voice. The rain slowed, the wind stilled, and after another minute, all was quiet. I turned to find my friends' open-mouthed stares. They were shocked, all of them except Driscoll. He fell to his knees once more, bowing to me. "What are you doing? Get up, the storm is over." Devon was next. "Guys, please don't do this." Then went Dom, Sean, and Gayla. "Tate, thank you. Please talk some sense into them. Tell them to get up. This is not necessary." He shook his head. The corner of his mouth curled up ever so slightly, not with derision, but more like a proud parent might regard a child on stage accepting a medal. Then he dropped, his knees splashing into the mud, and lowered his face to the ground. I dropped as well, placing myself squarely on their level and wiping the tears stinging at my eyes. The weight of everything I'd learned squeezed my chest, and I felt so alone and ill-prepared for whatever lay ahead. "Please," I said softly, "raise your heads. I need you all beside me, not below me. If we're going to change the world, it's going to take all of us." To be continued.